Hello, everyone. Namaste and heartful welcome to all of you for today's session. So, we have again Elizabeth's sister with us. So, now I'm requesting Dr. Elizabeth Denley to please begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivangi, and hi, everybody. Hope you've all had a good week and you're ready for some challenging subjects today. There's no way to get around the challenging nature of this week's session, but hopefully we'll make it fun enough that it's okay. We can all laugh about the situations we find ourselves in. Let me just share my screen to get started. So once again, we're looking at the 10 principles of heartful living. For those of you who haven't joined before, these are based on Babaji's 10 maxims from his book Commentary on the 10 Maxims of Sajmark. This was written in the 1940s, and these principles are really something which are a guiding light for us to try and mold our living so that we move towards a higher way of functioning in the world, a more evolutionary way of functioning in the world. And they really come under 5 sections, starting with practice, the innermost aspect of these principles, which is the foundation for everything. And then the 2 essential values that go on top of those. And at the moment, what we're looking at is we're looking at the next category of principles on behavior, on doing, how we are in the world, how we behave, how we act. And this week we're looking at principle number 7, which says here, do not seek revenge for the wrongs done by others. Instead, always be grateful. Most people, when they look at this one, just go, no, it's in the too hard basket. Be grateful when somebody does something that's hurtful or nasty to me. So we need to understand why and look at what Babaji is trying to say here. But first, let's start with our check-in. For those of you who haven't been here before, every week we start by closing our eyes, going into our hearts, and just checking on how we are. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? What's going on inside me, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? Just rest in your heart for a few moments and let it bubble up. Don't try and concentrate or force your mind to see what's going on. Instead, be very open-hearted, be very relaxed, and see what bubbles up. And once you've connected with your own heart and your own feelings, see if you can reach out to the hearts of the others in this group, all the people who are on this webinar, and connect with them. Feel the heart-to-heart connection with everyone on this call and everyone who's watching on YouTube, either now or in the future. Don't limit yourself by time or space. Feel the connection. And send some positive, prayerful thoughts to everybody whose heart you're connected with in this moment. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And now we're going to do a second type of check-in, which you can do with eyes open or closed, however you feel. We're going to look at this topic today in relation to our own lives. So, question for you. First question. How do you behave when a person hurts you deeply? That's the first one. You can think about some examples, if you like, of times when, and it's generally somebody we love dearly who does it, not some outsider. What do you do? How do you behave? Do you lash out? Do you get angry? Do you go inside yourself and withdraw and push the other person away? Do you plot your revenge? Or is it more subtle than that? Does it go into your subconscious and wait? Think about what you do, what your behavioral pattern is when another person hurts you deeply. It's generally not something we're very proud of, so you may not want to tackle this one very well. But if you can, it will be very helpful. And this one you don't need to share with anyone else, so don't worry, it's just for you. I'm not going to ask you to share how you behave. But now I want you to answer the question. Imagine feeling gratitude toward them. How does that feel? And is it easy? Somebody's really hurt you. They've done something unfair and unjust, or to really stab the knife in.
Okay.
So now imagine feeling gratitude. How easy is it? Would anyone like to put their hand up or write in the chat on how easy it is? I actually can't see the chat at the moment. Here it comes. I got it. And when that happens, is it automatic or does it take time? Do you have to process it to feel gratitude? What do you think? There's a reason why Babaji put it here. He put it here because we struggle with this. Otherwise, it wouldn't be one of the principles that we have to live up to. We'll understand why it's important later on, but let's just look at our own behavior first. Is it easy to immediately feel gratitude towards another person who's hurt us deeply? What do you think? Okay, we're not ready to write about that yet. It's okay. Let's move on and let's explore a little bit and see where we get to with this. See if we can start to understand what Babaji's talking about here. Okay, so Uma has written, when hurt, we feel sad and we dislike the other person. Yeah. Okay, so Christine's written, it takes time to feel gratitude. Is a process from the shock to thinking of them and why they would say, look at my own behavior, then accept, and then gratitude. Ting has written, it's hard. My heart hurts when I try to feel gratitude, but I am more related to attempt gratitude, which is a great start. Nan's written, mostly getting irritated. Shibangi, it's not easy, definitely. And in starting, we are not. But later on, slowly. Yeah. Slowly, it starts to come. So this is a common thing for all of us. Okay, Shubhanshu has written after Heartful Communication Workshop. It takes time to process and be grateful for me. But even that, almost saying when there's gratitude, even though it's not easy, she still feels more relieved. So let's look at this in more detail. I don't think it's easy for anybody, certainly not in the beginning. It takes a lot of battering to get to this stage, but let's explore it a bit more. So what does Babaji say? He says, if you're feeling wronged by anyone, somebody's got their microphone on and there's a lot of wind or disturbance in the background.
I muted.
Oh, thanks. He says, if you're feeling wronged by anyone, do not wish for revenge. Instead, think this comes from God and be grateful. What on earth is he talking about? This comes from God. Remember last week when we were talking about Principle 6, we were talking about the way we treated other people and the fact that when we hurt somebody else who has the same soul, their soul and our souls are the same, who is hurting whom. This week we're switching it. This week we're talking about what happens when someone hurts us. But it's the same principle. When we have the same soul, when their soul and ours are the same, who is hurting whom? And the same thing applies as last week with Principle 6. This awareness that we're one and that who is hurting whom in this when we're one, this dawns when we're in the deeper states of the second chakra of the heart, the Atma chakra. And if we become aware when we pass through this chakra, we will feel that oneness at the soul level. And once we feel this already, it's a start. Because if we no longer see the other person as different from us, is it as easy to feel wronged or to wish for revenge? It's like saying the index finger on my right hand has wronged my pinky finger on my left hand, therefore they're going to be at war. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Doesn't make any sense. But it's the same thing. Now, of course, it's much easier when we can experience that, when we can feel that oneness, because the whole idea of revenge becomes a little ridiculous in that context. It's in our separateness that we feel it, that we struggle so much with this, and yet still we do. Even when we know this, it's still difficult. And of course, revenge is there all around us. You know, it's there in popular literature, it's in the media, it's in almost every movie you go to see. It's admired, it's glorified, it's justified. If you watch a Marvel movie, what do you see? You see the bad guys doing wrong things, and you see the good guys getting their revenge. Same in the Mahabharata War, which I've put an image of here. Same in the Ramayana, same in most great epics from around the world. It's the leading theme. Good over evil, good triumphs over evil. In modern movies, in Star Wars, in ancient scriptures, it's there throughout every culture in the world. And you can say there's a fine line between revenge and upholding Dharma, which is in the intention. Did Arjun go onto the battlefield with the intention to get revenge? No, he didn't even want to fight. He didn't want revenge. He saw them as his cousins, his guru, his friends. He didn't want to kill anyone. So there is a fine line between wanting to do something to get back at someone and doing it for some higher purpose. But then we really have to examine this in a bit more detail, because often our revenge is very subtle and it can be even subconscious. We don't even think we're being revengeful, because we don't go around wanting to hit somebody or to put poison in their tea or, you know, do all those sorts of things. Often it's very, very subtle indeed, and we may not even know we're doing it. So how often, I'll give you an example. How often has somebody been really rude to you or hurt you, and you've just ignored them or cut them out of your group, say in the workplace or amongst friends, if a friend really hurts you? How often have you just subtly started ignoring them or not including them? That is also revenge. You're wanting to get back at the other person for what they've done to you. It may not last very long, but it's still there. It can still be there. Somebody hurts you, so for the next week or so, you avoid them. Does that make sense? You've experienced that? This is part of this principle, that we do this, that we can't immediately forgive. We need to take time, and while we're taking time and we're feeling bruised, we exclude that person. We don't follow principle 6. We no longer treat them as our brother or sister. Remember last week we spoke about when you're young and you have brothers and sisters and friends and you have a fight, within 10 minutes you're back playing again. We stop doing that. We start to retaliate, no matter how subtly or subconsciously it is. And in fact, the more subtle, the more subconscious, the more impactful it is. It's not like a kid who has a bit of a tantrum and gets upset and is over it in 10 minutes. No, we hold it inside. We let it fester away inside ourselves, and we create obstacles, barriers between people. And, you know, we can justify all this by saying it's Dharma. You know, we're upholding Dharma. And a war is a good thing because it's upholding Dharma. What do you think about that? Do you think that's still today a valid concept? Do you think what was upheld at the time of the Mahabharata War or the Ramayana is still valid today? I'm not going to answer that for you. I want you to think about that. Just to say that our consciousness continues to evolve. And I'm not so sure it is such a useful concept. I think it's a man-made concept. And that we could think about things in a very, very different way. And when we look at the origins of revenge, I think it's clear where it all comes from. So, what do animals do? Animals have survival instincts. So, for example, if during the season when all the grass is growing and all the, herbivores are having their babies, and, the cows, the reindeer, the buffalo, etc., they need to be able to control their populations so they don't overgraze. So what happens? They create territories, if you like, so that only a certain number of bison or only a certain number of buffalo feed in one place. And they mark territories and they often defend them. They compete with each other for space, for resources. Other animals eat animals. They are predators and they go after them, they attack them, and they might fight. So this concept of revenge, we can see the seeds of it in the survival instincts of most animal populations. And this is associated with the lower 3 chakras in the human system, our instincts to react, the fight or flight system, of which revenge is a part. Where it becomes more complicated, because with animals, they don't have ideas of right or wrong about this, or they don't think of it as getting back. They just simply do instinctually without any morality associated with it. But when that instinctual programming is entangled with the emotions of the human heart, then things get complicated. Then we start to have strong anger or negative feelings, or we dislike what somebody's done to us and we want to get revenge. And I would say that's also true socially. It's the cause of most wars. And everybody thinks they're on the right side in a war. Look at the Second World War. Both the Western Allies and the Germans and the Japanese thought they had God on their side. I'm sure it's the same in every war that's ever fought. It's not that one side is right and one side is wrong. That's a very simplistic way of looking at things. There's always a conflict, and revenge breeds revenge. Once one side starts, the other side starts, and on and on and on it goes. And it goes on for hundreds, thousands of years, as is the case in the Middle East at the moment with the Israeli-Palestine war. So we need to explore this, because the cultural narrative is that we should have an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, even though that's a very old form of justice, pre-Christian, pre-Buddhist form of justice. But if you look at modern culture, if you're not willing to stand up for yourself, so to speak, and take revenge, this is usually seen as cowardice or weakness. If I let other people trample all over me, if they do things and I don't retaliate, if they do the wrong thing and I don't get justice for myself, this is seen as weakness. So we're following a very archaic form of law, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that most people understand as the law of karma. If I do something wrong's got to happen to me. If I'm a good person, good things will happen to me. Well, unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. Bad things happen to good people all the time, and bad people get away with things all the time. And people look at it and go, what's wrong? What's God doing? But it doesn't work that way. On the other hand, most people who act out of revenge end up regretting it. Somebody who snaps back and gives that person a hard time generally doesn't feel good about it. They develop guilt, they develop shame, which of course are the hardest, the heaviest of emotions in our system to have to remove, the most difficult to remove. So this is not a good road to go down in terms of our own evolution, our own feelings of peace and calmness and stillness. Then there are other people who don't retaliate because they're scared of what could happen. So they harbor resentment, and that turns to bitterness. And often their type of revenge, their type of retaliation is slow. They might cut a person out, or they might be like, you know, the classic Agatha Christie movie where they wait until they can really get back at the person. But all these different types of behavior are all a result of the anger spectrum. You know, it's anger festering away inside, resentment for things having not gone right and wanting to get back at the other person. And then there's another group of people who feel sad. They feel humiliated when they've been wronged. And they feel deprived of respect, of honor and dignity. And so they can feel very sad, very depressed, very ashamed of themselves. They end up feeling victimized. And that, of course, leads to self-pity. That's also not a very healthy emotion. So just look at these different types of behaviors for a moment and think about what you do when somebody really hurts you. It can be a mixture of them all. It's not one or the other. But take a look at this. So we've got people acting out of revenge, people not acting because they're scared but harboring resentment that turns to bitterness and finding more subtle ways to get back, and then feeling sad, humiliated. Do any of those types of behaviors fit you? I think we can all see ourselves in some of them or most of them. But just think about it. What is your pattern? What are your main patterns? And how do you move through them? Does anyone want to talk about it, or do we just keep going? And I'm okay either way, because these are difficult topics to discuss.
Sister, I would like to ask something.
Sure.
Usually, because we are outward bound, right? The eyes are outward and everything, usually in the beginning, etc. It's easier to see this behavior in other people.
Yeah.
Because we might be in our own blind spot.
Yes.
And just like how when we start meditation, we think that it's good for that one and it's good for that one. We tend to hardly think that I need this too, right?
Yes.
So I find that it's very important to recognize this behavior and also recognize the tendency of ours is to see this in other people, and we associate these things. We can put, okay, this one behaves with shame, this one behaves with that, this one. And there will come a time, and we pray for it, that we can see it in ourselves.
Yes.
Even real time would be a cherry on the cake, but even in hindsight.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Gitanjali. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. This is the problem that we face, that it's in our subconscious. We've pushed it away because we don't like it, you know. And so now, of course, to face it, to look ourselves in the mirror, which is what meditation does for us, it's uncomfortable at times. We don't like to own up to all these things. And of course, they're there. And the more subtle they are as we progress, the harder it is to see them. And the harder it is to acknowledge them in ourselves because we think we're beyond all this. Many people think because I'm spiritual, because I meditate, I don't need to look at these things. But of course, they're there. And it requires a great deal of courage and maturity to be able to do what you're talking about. But this is our growth. This is what Babaji's saying to us. Do this. You know, find a way to do this. So a certain amount of humor and lightness are required. Otherwise, it's a grim old matter to do. So we have to find ways to support each other with it as well. And of course, what we learn very quickly in Heartfulness is that this isn't only up to us. We are so hardwired because of our instincts, because of these lower chakras, because of animalistic tendencies. We're so hardwired that it's not easy to even see these behaviors. They're instinctive. So what Babaji's talking about is he's talking about transforming our underlying belief system. We don't need to be hardwired for revenge. And I don't know how many of you have ever watched small children in the playground at school, say age 5, 6, 7. They can be brutal with this. I mean, you can often see the instinctual behavior, especially in small children who've not grown up with a spiritual background. It's rampant for all to see. They can be cruel, they can be retaliative, they can be revengeful. It's a very common thing in a school playground. And it's what teachers spend a lot of their time helping children to learn how to shift in behavior. But of course, it's difficult until we have a method, an approach to rise above these competitive animalistic instincts. And what we learn very, very quickly on a spiritual path is that this only happens when we can awaken the chakra above the lower 3 chakras, the heart chakra, of which there are 5 individual chakras that sit within the heart and the throat. And it's only once these are awakened, purified and awakened through a spiritual practice and through what we call the spiritual yatra, the journey through these chakras, that we can start to open up to more elevated levels of consciousness. Things like generosity, oneness we already talked about at chakra 2, and love for everyone. This is the crux of the matter. To do it on your own is really, really tricky. To do it and it's almost forced, it's almost artificial if you're doing it on your own. But once these chakras are opened, purified and opened, these states of being start to come automatically. I don't believe it's possible to really let go of a revengeful character without this. I think what happens, it just goes underground because we think it's wrong, and then it expresses in subtler ways. And that, of course, is more dangerous. So that's why practice is at the center of these 10 principles. It's the fundamental, the starting point. Without that, without the spiritual yatra, it's very, very hard to make these transformations. It's very hard for any of the 10 principles to really become part of your life because you're fighting an uphill battle. The minute you open up to this spiritual yatra, it all becomes possible. It doesn't mean you don't have to work on your behavior. You still have to work on it. But the ground has shifted so that things can change. The base shifts, the base opens up, the base becomes purer, lighter, more yielding, and so things start to shift. So what we're looking at here, what Babaji's talking about is he's talking about, instead of being hardwired for revenge, how do we become hardwired for gratitude? And I'm sure many of you understand what samskara theory is. The samskaras we hold, the knots, the heaviness in our chakras, in our human system, we have created in the past impressions in our energy body, in our subtle body. And we either clean them in a spiritual practice, or they're washed off by undergoing their effects. And this is known as bog, undergoing our bahog. Some people call it karma. We have to go through our karma because of what we've done in the past. Because until they're released from our system, until any entanglements, knots in our system are released, we will attract circumstances and people towards us who are there to act out our bog, to help us to let go of various tendencies and attitudes in ourselves through situations that we may call suffering. And if we're at the time able to just let go, accept, move on, those samskaras and tendencies will start to dissolve away. They'll be washed off. But what most of us do, of course, is we react in the moment. We react in our patterns. The universe is giving us a situation where we can change our patterns. We go into the same reactive patterns. We just reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. So what Babaji's saying is, he's saying, okay, now hardwire yourself for gratitude, so that instead of reacting, you start to dissolve away these samskaras. And of course, this is uncomfortable, because it's like we're saying, okay, this is happening to us because of what we've done in the past. Aren't we terrible people? We're so bad that this bad thing has to come and happen to us to clear us of our past impressions. It's not like that. It's not, there's no judgment in nature in that way. It's just like iron filings to a magnet. It's just, this vibration is there. Let's bring this to it to dissolve them. Simple as that. And if we can start looking at ourselves without all that guilt and shame and self-judgment and, oh, aren't I a terrible person? And woe is me, look what's happening to me. Life will start to get a lot easier, because it's really quite scientific. There's not a lot of room for beating up on yourself or beating up on anyone else in spirituality. And that's what these principles 6 and 7 are about. Principle 6 is don't beat up on others. Principle 7 is don't worry when people beat up on you, just accept. It's like we're all one soul. At times, due to life, we're going to hurt each other, but if we remember we're all one, we'll stop beating up on others and worrying when they beat up on us. We'll stop that cycle of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, back and forth. And the way to do that are these two principles. So what Babaji's saying is, perceive every challenge you go through in life as a catalyst for growth. And we will automatically start to develop gratitude towards miseries. And, you know, I love this quote from David Steindl-Rast: even the worst things that have happened are life-giving. Out of catastrophe, you got where you are. And Daji often talks about this. He says, you know, we never remember those events that were easy. We remember, you know, when we got stranded somewhere and we had to walk 10 kilometers through the pouring rain to get to somewhere. And, you know, we survived the challenge and we felt so good that we'd done it, etc. These things remain with us when we overcome a challenge. When we've had a really difficult run-in with somebody and we solve it and become friends, how does that make you feel? It's an amazing feeling, yes? When somebody who was your worst enemy becomes a friend. How is that? It's much better than having somebody who was an enemy stay an enemy, or somebody who was a friend stay a friend, because we've transcended something. So to carry on with this philosophy about it, with the science of it, our souls are trying to return to purity and simplicity. So they're trying to throw off all the samskaras, all the accumulated heaviness in our systems. And this is what triggers this process of bog. And it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle where the bits fit together and somebody comes into our life who is just the right person to trigger that process. Because we're stuck in ourselves and our own feelings of hurt and misery, we misunderstand. Instead of taking it as an opportunity, we can't react maturely. And so on account of ignorance, we get hurt, we get upset. Understandable, it's our ego reacting. We all do it. We all need to learn and grow. But this is the process of maturity. And will it happen if only nice people and nice situations are around you? No, you won't grow in that way. You won't continue to become stronger and stronger. So what happens is these so-called sufferings neutralize our samskaras. They facilitate, they're catalysts for them to release. So when we instead retaliate, when we try and get back with revenge at the other person, it's like attacking the doctor who has taken a thorn from our foot or done open heart surgery on us. It brings a lot of pain, of course, but it saves our life. It brings relief. So our shift is to think of this as an evolutionary thing, as a challenge for our own growth. When we start to trust this process of nature, I wouldn't even call it spiritual. I would just say this is the way the world works. This is nature. As the Buddha said, suffering is just part of this world. When we accept that and we think, all right, it's there for a purpose, it's only there to help us become stronger and stronger human beings and to let go of all this rubbish that we've got inside us, we start to feel maybe not grateful at first, but we start to accept. And then gradually over time, the gratitude comes. And, you know, there's this wonderful quote of Confucius, I love it, which says the same thing. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. You know, I mean, he's so clever the way he said it, right? It's your grave too, not just the other person's. You're the one who's really, really going to suffer from revenge. And it doesn't matter whether it's the simplest, lightest, I'm not going to see that person for the rest of the day because of what they did to me, or when you want to take a hatchet and go after somebody. Same deal. One's just more subtle than the other, but exactly the same thing applies. So this is the shift we've got to make. What's Babaji done in this principle? He's changed the locus of responsibility to us, not to the other person. So instead of feeling wronged, hurt, like I have to get revenge, instead we're changing our mindset to enabling ourselves to do better instead of being the victim. As Christine mentioned earlier, after the initial shock of something happening, we can start to do something about it. Eventually, you'll get to a point where that shock even isn't there. But until it is, wait till the shock's passed. And the next step is to pause. Because this is where we can start to shift our consciousness, our perspective. Once we pause and accept that this has happened, try and get to that neutral state. Then we can start to feel gratitude. And I love this, what Babaji writes. I mean, this for me is such a critical statement in all this. You know, do animals, when they've hurt some other animal, do they feel guilty or sad or angry or whatever? No, not at all. Because they're not caught up in the heart in the same way. And Babaji says, when we do something by applying our head and heart, we form impressions. It's the emotions in the mix that make it so difficult for us. Otherwise, we could go around like sociopaths, being axe murderers, and it wouldn't affect us. But we're not like that. Our hearts are geared to care. So when something happens, it's tough. We know something's right or wrong. Inherently, our conscience tells us, right? So I'm almost done, and then we'll have some time for discussion. So let's look at how to apply this. And the simplest thing is to understand that we don't need to get even. Any revengeful act, even if it's the subtlest of, I'm just going to have a break from this person for a while. I'm going to just not hang around them for a week or so, or whatever it is. Or feeling self-pity. Why did they do this to me? When you realize that you don't need to get even with anyone, it's the beginning of wisdom. So can you imagine a situation in which you feel revengeful or you feel resentful for what another person's done? Imagine yielding to that person. Do you have a big enough heart to yield to that person? Even if it's difficult, just become aware of this possibility, that this is the way we free our hearts. For our own benefit as much as anything, because impressions cannot thrive in a compassionate and grateful heart. They just cannot. They can't stick. When we're grateful for everything, the impression will not stick. It will not form as a knot in our system. It will not have to be removed sometime down the track. So this idea of pausing, so that you can analyze how your mind became revengeful, how to avoid it. You'll start to see the steps, and you'll then be able to change the tendency in yourself. So this idea of pausing, which Daji once said was the thing that he learned most from Charaji as a teacher. This idea of pause and poise. So pause, wait, and forget the whole thing after learning whatever lessons you can. And if possible, like I said before, if the other person can also learn something so that you become friends, that is a really noble outcome of the endeavor. Because wise people do things differently. They don't focus on others. They don't focus on what the other person is doing. If they focus on themselves and try to see where they've gone wrong. What has caused this? So I want to finish before we have time for some questions with this is something that Lalaji wrote in a letter to one of his associates, which is something you can do, something we all can do when we feel that barrier or closedness or revenge or whatever we feel towards another person who's hurt us. So I'm going to read out the instructions if you want to sit with your eyes closed. We'll just do it as a guided practice. It's there in the Fear Detox module. It's there in Lalaji's Complete Works Volume 3, in one of the letters. It's an amazing technique. If you're harboring any resentment, any feeling of hurt towards another person, this will help you. So sit comfortably and close your eyes and imagine the form of the person in front of you. This person who has hurt you or upset you or made you angry because of what they've done. And have the thought that this person is my friend and well-wisher. Start with that. This person is my friend and well-wisher. Think that all negative thoughts the person has about you are going, and thoughts related to your welfare have been infused in them instead. So if you're on your own, you're not near the person, this is what you do. Have the thought that the person is my friend and well-wisher, and think that all negative thoughts the person has about you are going, and thoughts related to your welfare have been infused in them instead. Second practice. You can open your eyes for this. So whenever you have the opportunity to go near that person, gently and subtly pay attention to their face, but very indirectly without staring. Just become aware of their face. And when you breathe out, have the thought that particles of your love and affection are entering their heart. When you breathe in, have the thought that you are pulling all the negative thoughts they have about you from their heart and throwing them aside. So again, this is when you're close to the person. Indirectly and subtly pay attention to their face. Breathe out, infusing particles of your love and affection into their heart. Breathe in, pull out all the negative thoughts they have about you and throw them aside. So this is an incredible practice that you can do with anyone that this happens with. And as Lalaji says, initially this task may seem difficult and you may feel resistance in you, but if you are courageous, it will become easy as you practice it. Okay, so that's all from me. Any questions? Anything you'd like to share or you'd like to ask?
Should I stop live streaming on YouTube, sister?
Sure.